If you're dealing with rosacea issues, this can be kind of a reddening of the skin. It's usually in the face or cheeks, and a lot of people say that it seems to be dilating some blood vessels, and that's what creates that red appearance. And sometimes it can almost look like little spider vein type situations on your face. And when you're dealing with rosacea, when you try to research what's going on, the answer is like, we don't know. And it kind of makes sense when you dig into a little bit, because there really is no one cause for rosacea, and you're going to see that there can be quite a variety of things that can create this issue. So in this video, I'm going to address a viewer question about rosacea and help you understand the most common links to what may be going on and steps you can take to see if you can create some improvement. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So it was over on our video for the importance of balancing both sides of digestion that Johnny67 something or other asked, can you do a video on rosacea and its connection with the gut? And when we're looking at some type of symptom or disease or issue that the medical world doesn't really understand what's causing it, it can be really helpful to look, okay, well, what do we know about it? What do we see with this issue that can give us insights into what may be creating it? So remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice about your rosacea, but I wanted to share some studies that I found when researching this topic that can kind of give you some insights into what may be going on. So let's start here with this study on rosacea, germs, and bowels, a review of gastrointestinal comorbidities and gut-skin axis of rosacea. And what's interesting when we look at rosacea is we have to understand that we're going to talk a little bit about this microbiome in the gut and all this research that seems to be pointing to this association between issues in this gut and this rosacea issue. But there's also like a microbiome on our skin. Like there's varmints and little creatures that live on and in our skin. And so that has the ability to be a factor. But when I dug into these studies, they say, yeah, that can be a thing, but we're really seeing a much stronger connection to these things that are going on inside the body. So we'll look at this study, and what they say is rosacea has been reported associated with various gastrointestinal diseases, including inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, irritable bowel syndrome, gastroesophageal reflux disease, H. pylori infection, and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. So they're seeing really strong connections here in this other study here on role of the skin microbiota and intestinal microbiome in rosacea. They're talking about how this skin has a microbiome basically on it, and they say, however, the skin is not only affected by its own microorganisms, because recent studies have suggested that the skin can be affected by the gastrointestinal microbiome. The most frequently mentioned comorbidity is gastrointestinal disease among all kinds of rosacea. So there's different types of rosacea and different severities for sure, but they're saying that the most common issue that shows up with this more than anything else is gastrointestinal disease or issues going on in that area. And this study here says rosacea is associated with chronic systemic diseases in a skin severity dependent manner, results of a case control study. And they say that among 130 participants, we observed a significant association between rosacea and allergies, both airborne and food allergies, respiratory disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, other gastrointestinal diseases, hypertension, metabolic and urogenital diseases, and female hormone imbalance. Compared with mild rosacea, moderate to severe rosacea was significantly associated with hyperlipidemia, hypertension, metabolic diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and gastroesophageal reflux disease. So when we're going to break these things down a little bit, and we're looking at these strong associations here, and these are the ones that seem to be strong associations, one thing to consider is that what you'll hear a lot about is that, oh, I had a rosacea flare-up after I had an episode of stress, some type of emotional stress, and then afterwards I had this really flare-up of my rosacea. And a lot of people will have rosacea come and go, and they'll see it really magnified during a stress time. And one interesting thing when you look at these issues that they say that they show up most commonly when they're looking at rosacea, these hyperlipidemia, which is high cholesterol levels, and hypertension or high blood pressure, metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. All of these things are a stress on the body. So, when we have an emotional stress in our life, it creates these reactions in the body, and a lot of people see these rosacea magnifications during a stressed episode. But the body having its own stress can cause the body to react in a similar way. So even if a person is not having stress in their life, there could be stress in the body that is creating this situation with rosacea. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. But one interesting thing is you see a lot about acid reflux and a lot of these other digestive things. And Johnny 62D4090 wants to talk about rosacea and its connection with the gut. But the important thing to understand is that it's not always going to be about the gut. It can just be about other stressors in the body. There's a lot of other connections to things we're not going to dig into a lot today, with things like, heavy metal toxicity that can have a situation where that seems to be associated with rosacea, and mold exposure and things like that. So there's lots of things that can stress the body that seem to show up with this rosacea issue. But since there is no singular one cause for rosacea, and there's a singular one cause for almost nothing. Just about anything out there is going to have the ability to be caused by a variety of different issues, and that's why there's so much confusion. A lot of the medical world is just looking for one answer, and instead of looking for one answer, we really need to look at the person and seeing what's going on with that person. So if you're looking to create improvement to your rosacea, you may have to become your own health detective, research some things so that you know the right questions to ask your doctor when you're talking to them about this. So one thing that I like to just knock out of the way when I'm looking at any type of skin issue is the body's ability for the detox pathways to work correctly. And significantly in this conversation, this detox pathway has a lot to do with our digestive process. So most people know that the liver filters all this junk and toxins out of the body. That's kind of one of its major jobs. But a lot of people don't know that the liver makes this bile that gets stored in the gallbladder that kind of helps us digest our food correctly. It's very important for that digestive process for a wide variety of reasons that I've talked about in 758 different videos. Just watch any other of my video and you're going to hear me talking about bile helping us digest our food correctly. But what a lot of people don't know is that the liver puts a lot of that filth and junk that it filters out of the body into that bile. And it does that because this bile comes down here to help us digest our food, and it moves through the intestinal tract while that food is moving through there. So it's carrying all those toxins that came from the liver so that they can go out the back door when we poop like a champion. So that's the body's main detox pathway. The problem is it's very common for someone's bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly for a wide variety of reasons. And one of those really common reasons is stress. Stress hormones going too high have the ability to thicken up this bile. So if it's not flowing, then all this filth and toxins that the liver filtered out don't leave. And now this whole system is becoming too toxic, and the body's like, what am I going to do? I got to get some of this junk out of here. And one of the backup systems that the body can use is it can try to push some toxins out through the pores in the skin. The skin is one of our organs, and it happens to be a detox organ. So when this body is trying to push too much junk out through those pores, it can clog those pores or irritate those pores or possibly dilate those structures in there that can create a wide variety of issues. So when somebody's having a skin issue, I want to know, is their bile flowing correctly? That's very important to know, just to knock that out, because it's so common. So if you don't understand that, or if you're new to this channel, I'll put a link in the description below this video along with all these studies that we're talking about. I'll put a link to our video for 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can go through that and see, are there issues going on that maybe I need to correct in that area. So knock that out first of all, but then a lot of these studies that we're looking at are looking at invaders in this digestive tract. And they're looking at all of these issues with the microbiome, and they're talking about, oh, this is really common with an H. pylori infection. And an H. pylori is a type of bacteria that comes in here and sets up camp in the stomach where it really shouldn't be. Most of our beneficial bacteria should exist in this large intestine. We don't want a lot of bacteria in the stomach or in the small intestine, where that other study was talking about that it's common to see rosacea with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. So we know that when these organisms are in here where they really shouldn't be, that we see all these issues show up. And one thing to think about is that we know all living organisms have a waste product that they put out. So if you have, a cajillion of these varmints in your digestive tract all pooping on one day, that's a lot of extra filth and toxins that the body has to figure out, well, what am I going to do with all this? So that's an extra burden on the body. It's an extra stress on the body. But also, does that mean that the body's going to try and push some of this stuff out through the skin? So is that a reason why we're seeing rosacea with so many of these digestional invader type problems? I don't know. But it does have the ability to make a little bit of sense when we look at how these things work. And one thing that's really interesting is that everybody seems to talk about this gastroesophageal reflux disease, and that seems to be so common with this rosacea issue. And what we need to understand about reflux is that reflux is not caused by having too much stomach acid like advertisers want us to believe. In most cases, reflux is caused by not having enough stomach acid. To trigger this valve at the bottom of the esophagus called the lower esophageal sphincter, that thing's supposed to open so food can come in, and then once the food starts to acidify, that acid in the stomach triggers that LES valve to close so things don't come back up. But if someone just has a small amount of acid, it's not enough to trigger this LES valve to close, and then the small amount they have is coming back up to burn them. So that's important to understand because we need this stomach acid to help us break down our food correctly. We have to acidify that food so that we can break it down and get the nutrients out of that food. But beyond that, that stomach acid is also meant to be the barrier to the whole digestive tract. So when someone doesn't have enough stomach acid, like we see when we see acid reflux, then they don't have enough acid to kill the varmints when they come in on the food that we're eating. So they're supposed to die in an acid bath in that stomach. But when we don't have enough stomach acid, they come in, they set up camp. Oh, this is nice here. We'll raise our kids here. We'll have a keg party. It's going to be great. And so they have a keg party here, and then they move down into the small intestine. We create that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth issue. And then we have all these bad guys in here that shouldn't be there. And then they make their way down into the gut and create this dysbiosis and these problems with the microbiome where we have an imbalance between the good bacteria that should be there and all these bad guys that have kind of taken over. And so that could be one of these reasons why we see this acid reflux so often with this rosacea issue, is because acid reflux is a sign that the front door is open. It's open for all these bad guys to come in, and we see these strong associations between all these gastrointestinal problems and diseases that are associated with rosacea. And a lot of these diseases just have to do with either an overgrowth in this system, a lot of bad guys creating trouble, or digestive malfunctions. One of those digestive malfunctions can be a lack of stomach acid. That lets the bad guys in. Another digestive malfunction can be this bile is not flowing correctly. When these two things are not happening, these are the things that kind of trigger this other stuff to happen. This triggers the pancreas to squirt out these enzymes that help us break down our food and bicarb that helps neutralize these acids. And when all these things are not working correctly, it has the ability to create a lot of inflammation down here in the intestinal tract and the large intestine and the bowels. So a lot of these things that we're looking at that, oh man, sorry about your luck, you got that kind of irritable bowel kind of thing situation. Well, a lot of times there's a reason that it's irritable. There's things creating inflammation. There's malfunctions in this digestive system that are not allowing things to work the way that they're supposed to work. So we know a lot of inflammation can come from those type of situations. We know that these situations up here, the high cholesterol, high blood pressure, metabolic issues, we know that most of those will often also include a high level of insulin that can also create inflammation. When we're looking at some of these other things, that why would these issues be associated, we see things like allergies and respiratory diseases, and they talk sometimes about this rosacea being these blood vessels are in the skin are kind of getting dilated. And one thing that we need to think about is that when we look at like seasonal allergies, a lot of times this has to do with a person being stuck too far in the parasympathetic side of our autonomic nervous system. And in that state, the body also will dilate these blood vessels. So is this why these blood vessels are dilating with this rosacea? I can't say that, but that is a situation that could create that. But I think they could also be dilated from irritation or some type of inflammation as well. So that really brings us back to this understanding of you can create the same symptom from a wide variety of angles. It's not always going to be the same thing for every person. And when we talk about, they talked about that they see seasonal allergies, but also food allergies. And in a lot of cases, these food allergies are really about bad bacteria environments and yeast, mold, fungal type invaders in this intestinal tract that have the ability to change the permeability of that intestinal lining. And especially varmints in the category of fungal, yeast, mold type bad guys like candida and things like that, they have the ability, it appears, to kind of bore holes through that intestinal tract. And then if food is not being broken down correctly, like we see when there's not enough stomach acid or bile is not flowing correctly for all these things to work correctly, then that food doesn't get fully broken down into the elemental nutrients that the body is looking for, like amino acids and vitamins and minerals. That's what the body's looking for. If it's still coming in like it's a chicken sandwich and it gets through that over-permeable intestinal lining, then that's what creates these food sensitivities. It's basically the body going to war with these varmints. And in my experience with clients dealing with rosacea, it just appears to me, and I've heard of other people saying this as well, that most commonly it appears to be some type of yeast, mold, or fungal invader that's kind of setting up the terrain to create a lot of trouble, get things into the wrong place, into the bloodstream where it shouldn't be before it's really broken down into elemental nutrients with all those food sensitivity issues. A lot of people feel like rosacea has the ability to be a histamine intolerance issue, which can be created in a similar pathway. A lot of times these people that are histamine intolerant are dealing with a deficiency in a specific type of enzyme, and then they're eating a lot of these wrong foods that are higher in histamine, or maybe their body's creating histamine for some type of immune response. If you want to dig into that aspect a little bit more, I'll put a link in the description below this video for our video on steps to improve histamine intolerance. So you can see you really have to become a detective to figure this out. But when we're looking at these fungal type issues, this could be why a lot of people see improvement when they're rosacea, when they're using things like, grapefruit seed extract or Peau d'Arco or, caprylic acid. These are all antifungal natural agents that people take internally and see some improvement with rosacea. And I feel like it's only going to create improvement for people if they're dealing with some type of yeast, mold, fungal issue. If rosacea for them is being caused by some stress in the body or some other irritant creating this, that's not really going to help them at all. And that's why we see such a discrepancy between, oh, this really helps, and no, this did nothing for me at all. It's really about looking at the person and not some remedy for a symptom that that person is dealing with. So when you're looking at the most effective steps to improve your rosacea, it's about figuring out what's going on with you. It's, am I dealing with emotional stress in my life? If not, is my body dealing with some type of stress like invaders? Do I have other signs of some type of overgrowth in my digestive tract that could be creating any types of trouble? If so, then you need to take steps to bring those invaders down a little bit. Are there digestive malfunctions going on? Because if there's a lack of stomach acid and you're showing signs of poor stomach acid, then there's likely going to be invaders in there because the front door is open and it's hard to avoid all these bacteria environments that come in on the food that we're eating. So if that's a problem, then it's likely that that could be a problem as well. Are your detox pathways working correctly? Is your bile flowing so toxin can leave the body like they're supposed to? Or does your body have to use these backup methods and try and push stuff out through the pores and the skin? Those seem to be the most important steps, and you can see that not all of them are going to be addressing the same thing. There could be a variety of issues. Now, a person might need to dig deeper into looking into other possible causes like heavy metals or other things that could be creating some trouble. And since these things are seen so commonly with rosacea, if you're dealing with any of these things, well, taking steps to improve those issues seems to have the ability to help. But the most important thing is to understand that this is going to take some work. You're going to have to figure out what's going on and what steps are going to help you. If you need help with that, if you're new to this channel, we'll put a link in the description below for our totally free digestion course that kind of walks you through figuring out which aspects of digestion may not be working correctly and steps you can take to improve those, as well as looking at some of these other factors to see, does my body appear to be stressed, and Do I need to fix some of these other metabolic issues that might have the ability to improve this issue as well? So you might have to dig through that to do that work, but we'll put the link to that totally free course in the description below so you can access that if you need help walking through the process. Or if you want to jump over right now, you can check out our video on full digestive reset that'll walk you through figuring out if you might be dealing with some digestive malfunctions yourself. I can't wait to hear about your results.